My name is Adeline Howard. I'm 30 years old. And 4 years ago, when my mother died, she left me an old SUV in her will, while giving my older sister everything else. Not just the house, not just the savings, but even the last words people usually leave behind like a warm blanket. I walked away from the home that held my entire childhood with nothing but a set of keys and the sound of silence following me out the door. No one saw me off. No one asked me to stay. And that cold indifference, especially from my sister after Mom's death, taught me something I never learned in school or at work. You can survive heartbreak, but you have to stop expecting your own family to be the ones who save you. If you've ever been pushed out of the place you once called home, really pushed, not just asked to leave, then stay with me, because maybe you'll recognize yourself in what I'm about to tell you. It started years earlier, on a Christmas Eve that looked perfect from the outside. Snow blanketed the porch and the street in front of the house, like someone had smoothed the world down with a clean white palm. The old family home, my mother's pride, glowed early, lights twinkling along the roofline, window candles flickering like practice warmth. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of cinnamon cookies, roast meat, and pine from the carefully decorated tree. Relatives filled the rooms with laughter that bounced off the walls and landed in predictable places. Everything was festive, everything was full, everything looked like love. And yet, I moved through that house like a ghost who knew the floor plan better than anyone. After Dad passed, I stayed, partly because it was close to work, sure, but mostly because my mother's health was fading in that quiet way illness does when it wants you to pretend it isn't happening. She would still smile, still insist she was fine, still fold napkins into neat triangles like that alone could keep our family intact. But even with all of us under the same roof, I never felt present at these gatherings, because no one was really waiting for me. They were waiting for Lucinda, my older sister. We called her Lucy when we were kids, but somewhere along the way, Lucy became Lucinda, like she'd upgraded even her name. She always arrived late, not accidentally, strategically, like she wanted the room to warm up first so she could walk into it and make the temperature change. I heard the front door open, a wave of cold air rushing in, followed by a voice that didn't ask permission to be heard. Sorry, traffic was insane. And then she appeared. Tailored coat, flashy watch, hair smooth and shining like it belonged in a commercial. A bottle of expensive wine tucked under her arm like proof she lived a better life than the rest of us. She stepped into the living room, and the whole room reoriented around her. My mother's face transformed, bright, immediate, hungry with relief. Lucy! Mom moved faster than her joints usually allowed, arms opening wide like she'd been holding her breath all evening. Lucy kissed her cheek, then announced loudly, Mom, you have to try this. Limited edition, straight from Bordeaux. Relatives swarmed her the way people swarm a celebrity they don't want to admit they admire. Compliments flew like confetti. You look amazing. That coat, wow. Did you really get that new Tesla already? Lucy laughed, soaking it in, answering like she was doing everyone a favor by existing. I walked out from the kitchen, still wearing oven mitts, a tray of roasted vegetables in my hands. I nodded, smiled, said, Hey, everyone. No one turned fully toward me. Not because they were cruel, because they were used to me. I was part of the wallpaper, a familiar piece of furniture, always there. No need to introduce, no need to notice. At dinner, I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, the one closest to the kitchen, like my role came with a built-in exit route. Lucy sat across from Mom, right under the chandelier, where the light hit her face like it was designed to. Halfway through the meal, Lucy tilted her wine glass toward me, raising her voice just enough for the whole table to hear. Merry Christmas, she said, smile sharp and bright. Everyone here is killing it, making moves. A pause, just long enough for attention to settle. And then, she continued, eyes flicking to me like I was a detail in the background, some of us are keeping it humble, still living at Mom's, still driving that old SUV. Her laugh was soft, controlled, the kind of laugh that makes other people feel obligated to join in so they don't look uptight. But hey, she added, as if she were being kind, as long as you're happy, Adeline. Someone on my father's side chuckled, not even maliciously, just reflexively. Like Lucy's words had decided what was funny, and everyone else followed. A few eyes flicked toward me, awkward sympathy, the kind that doesn't help because it still agrees with the insult. I smiled. I raised my glass back to her. My lips curved, but my hand tightened around the stem so hard I thought it might snap. Mom didn't say anything. She just passed Lucy another slice of pie and murmured, You've grown up. Keep pushing forward. Not to me, to her. The message was subtle, but I'd spoken that language since childhood. Lucy shone, I stayed dim, and the world called it balance. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the relatives drifted into the living room to exchange gifts and stories, I stood for a moment in the kitchen alone. The house hummed with laughter behind me, and I realized something that hit harder than Lucy's little joke. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even surprised. I was just tired. Because from a young age, I understood I couldn't outshine my older sister. Not because she told me not to, but because of how our parents reacted whenever I did. When I was 9, I came in first in math class. Lucy, 11 at the time, placed third in the school academic competition. I brought my certificate home like it was treasure, hands shaking with pride as I handed it to Mom. She barely glanced at it. Then she said, light as a feather, like it didn't matter. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just stay consistent, okay? Don't make your sister feel bad. I was 9, and that sentence didn't stab me. It settled. Quiet, persistent, impossible to shake. Like dust that keeps collecting no matter how many times you wipe the surface. Over time, I learned the rule. Being exceptional was a privilege reserved for Lucy in this house. If I achieved something, it mattered only if it didn't dim her spotlight. So I started guarding my joy, not to be humble, to be safe. When I was 12, a teacher told me I had a unique voice and asked me to join the school performance group. I said no. I told everyone I was too busy with tutoring. But the truth was uglier and smaller. I was afraid Lucy would hear about it, afraid my parents would do that thing again, pretend it was nothing worth noticing. Years passed, and relatives would occasionally ask, so what about Adeline? What's she up to? And Mom would answer with the same brief reply every time. She's doing fine. Not the flashy type, but she's a good girl. That was it. Not pride, not wonder, just fine. I learned to shrink myself in every room, every story, every celebration, until I became someone who could sit at her own family table and still feel like she didn't belong there. And that Christmas Eve, with snow pressing softly against the windows and the house glowing like a postcard, I didn't know it yet. But I was already being trained for what came next. Because a year later, my mother would be gone. And the last thing she would teach me, without ever saying it out loud, was exactly where I stood in her heart. When there was something valuable on the line, I used to think the worst kind of pain was the loud kind. The kind that explodes, screaming fights, slammed doors, bitter words you can't take back. But I learned something the year my mother died. The quiet pain is worse. Because it doesn't give you a scene. It doesn't give you closure. It just erases you. It happened on an early autumn morning. The kind of morning that still smells like summer in the air, but the light is thinner, like the season is already pulling away. I remember waking up late because I'd stayed up the night before finishing a report for work. I remember walking down the hall, still half asleep, already forming the thought that I needed to make coffee before Mom woke up. Mom always woke up early. Always. Even when her health started to fade, she still insisted on being the first one in the kitchen, like the house would collapse if she didn't start the day. So when I walked past her bedroom and the door was open and her bed was empty, I felt a strange, sharp pause in my chest. The kitchen light was on. The smell of coffee lingered, fresh and bitter, like someone had just brewed it. Then I saw her. She was on the floor near the counter, one arm curled awkwardly beneath her cheek pressed to the cold tile, like she'd fallen asleep in the middle of life. For 1 second, I just stood there, frozen. Not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because my mind refused to accept that this was real. "Mom?" I said, my voice thin. No answer. I dropped to my knees beside her, shaking her shoulder gently at first, then harder. My hands started to tremble so badly I could barely dial 911. I remember the phone slipping in my grip. I remember my breath coming out in short, panicked bursts, like I'd been running. And I remember something else, something stupid and small. A broken mug on the floor, coffee pooling around the shards, my fingers stained brown as I tried to move pieces away from her. Later, the doctor would tell me it was a stroke, that it was fast, that she likely didn't feel pain. That was the only comfort anyone could offer, and it felt like being handed a tissue in a flood. I was 31 years old. And yet I can't clearly remember how I got from the kitchen to the hospital. All I know is that I sat in a waiting room with coffee on my hands that I couldn't wash off no matter how many times I scrubbed. Because it wasn't coffee anymore. It was proof that the last morning I saw my mother alive ended on the floor. 3 days later, we buried her. Simple, just like she wanted. No elaborate flowers, no dramatic speeches. But somehow Lucy still found a way to make it an entrance. She arrived straight at the cemetery in a private car, wearing a perfectly tailored black coat and dark sunglasses, even though the sky was gray and the air was heavy, not bright. I stood next to the grave with my hands clasped in front of me, staring at the lowered casket, feeling like my body was there, but my soul was stuck in the kitchen that morning. Lucy stepped up beside me. Her perfume cut through the cold like a sharp blade. She didn't cry. Or if she did, it was the kind of cry that appeared and disappeared neatly, as if she could control grief the same way she controlled everything else. She hugged a few relatives, let them pat her shoulders, let them whisper condolences like she was the daughter who lost the most. And I noticed something that made me feel sick. People looked at her with sympathy. People looked at me with mild curiosity, as if I were the neighbor who came to pay respects. That was the first time I realized something terrifying. Even at my mother's funeral, I was not the main character in my own loss. A month after Mom passed, the lawyer called. "We need to schedule a meeting to go over your mother's will." The word will should have been neutral, but the moment I heard it, something stirred inside me, something I couldn't name. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was more like the last remaining child in me, still stupid enough to wonder if this time would be different. The meeting was held in the living room, the same room where Mom used to keep her vase of white chrysanthemums on the table. The same room where she'd crochet in the corner chair by the fireplace, yarn tangling around her fingers while she watched old movies. That chair was empty now, and it looked wrong, like a missing tooth. Uncle James was there too, Dad's younger brother. He sat beside me quietly, his posture calm, his presence like a wall I could lean on without asking. Lucy arrived 10 minutes late, of course. She swept in like the room belonged to her already, and the way she glanced around, at the furniture, the framed photos, the mantel, made my stomach twist, like she was mentally labeling what was hers. The lawyer opened the folder and began reading, voice steady, formal. Mrs. Elaine Howard bequeaths all of her assets, including the family home, savings account, and shares in the retirement fund. Lucy's lips curved slightly. To her eldest daughter, Ms. Lucinda Howard. The words landed in the room like a judge's gavel. I heard every syllable, not because I was shocked, but because some part of me had known for years. The lawyer didn't pause long before continuing. As for the remainder of the will, Mrs. Elaine Howard wished to leave her younger daughter, Ms. Adeline Howard. My heart ticked once, fast and desperate. A 2008 Toyota Highlander SUV. That was it. The room didn't spin. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I just stared at the empty chair by the fireplace, because in that moment, it didn't feel like Mom had died. It felt like she had spoken one last sentence very clearly. "You were never the one I chose." Lucy turned to me, shrugged like it all made sense, and said casually, "Mom knew I could handle it. I'll keep the house in good shape." Handle it. Like the house was a business project, not the place where I wiped Mom's mouth when she couldn't eat properly. Not the place where I stayed up at night listening for her breathing. I didn't respond. Not because I was stunned. Because deep down, I was tired of being surprised by something I had lived with my whole life. Uncle James sat silent through the reading. Even as the lawyer closed the file and stood up, Uncle didn't say a word. Then, suddenly, he leaned forward. His voice was calm, but the sarcasm was sharp enough to cut glass. "No note?" he asked the lawyer. "Not even a line saying, 'Sorry, Adeline, I forgot you're the one who lived with me during my final years'?" The room went stiff. Lucy shifted in her seat, eyes flicking away. Uncle James continued, turning to Lucy now, voice still even, but heavier. "You believe having your name on a piece of paper is enough to claim a home?" he asked. "And you think the daughter who stayed with your mother until the very end doesn't deserve even half of that kitchen?" Lucy leaned back, arms crossing. A soft chuckle. "I didn't take anything," she said. "Mom made her choice. She trusted me. I'm just following her wishes." Uncle nodded slowly, then stood up. He glanced at me, not with pity, but with something steadier. "You're not alone in this, Addie," he said. Then he looked at Lucy and added quietly, like a warning that didn't need to be loud. "And hey, being the chosen one doesn't always mean you're the one who deserves it." 2 days later, Lucy came back to the house like it was a kingdom she'd been waiting to inherit. She moved into the main bedroom. She rearranged Dad's old desk like she was erasing him. She brought in contractors to measure for renovations. And she had the back gate lock changed, without ever asking me. I was still living there. But I already knew what I was now. Temporary. A week later, I came home from Uncle James's place. As soon as I stepped inside, Lucy was standing in the hallway holding a folder. She spoke like she was reading neighborhood rules. "These are the house ownership papers," she said. "I'm transferring everything fully into my name." She lifted her chin slightly. Mom didn't leave you anything here, so I think it's best if you start making arrangements to move out soon. I looked at her for 3 seconds. Didn't ask why. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. Everything was unfolding exactly as expected. Maybe she couldn't stand my silence because she added lightly, "Is a week enough?" I nodded. That was it. That night, I packed my clothes into a suitcase. Not much. Essentials, personal documents, 2 unread books, and the car repair kit Mom once bought me. Everything else I left behind, including the room I had repainted white for her just last spring. I thought at the very least something would make it hard to walk away. A photograph, a lingering smell, a single object I couldn't bear to abandon. But there was nothing. And that emptiness, quiet, hollow, hit harder than Lucy's cruelty. The next morning, snow had fallen all night. It blanketed the roof of my SUV and froze over the arching porch trees like the house was wearing a cold crown. I pulled my suitcase down the front steps. The wheels ground across the dry snow, leaving jagged tracks behind me. Cold, uneven, like the rhythm of my breath. No one came outside. No one opened a window. No one called my name. And as I reached the driver's door, I realized something that made my throat tighten. Some places you once called home eventually become nothing more than someone else's mailing address. I got into the SUV. The engine wheezed softly into the pale air. My breath fogged the windshield, thin, blurry, gone in seconds. Just like the life I'd left behind. I didn't go far. Uncle James opened the door as soon as I called. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He stood there, shirt untucked, holding a half-finished cup of coffee, and stepped aside like I was coming back from a grocery run. "Thank God," he said with a laugh. "I've got a room ready. Make yourself at home." I rolled my suitcase inside. The air in his house felt warmer than I remembered, not just because of the heat, because of the feeling that I was not tolerated. I was wanted. I sat on the sofa, still wearing my coat. Uncle James took the seat across from me, set his coffee down, and said in a low, steady voice, "You don't have to explain anything. I get it." I nodded. Not out of politeness, because I truly had nothing left to explain. The silence that followed was long, but somehow it was right. Then Uncle James spoke again, eyes fixed on the space ahead. "Some people think they've kept everything," he said, "but they've lost the one thing that matters most." I didn't ask who he meant. I already knew. He leaned back slightly. "You don't need to outrun her," he continued. "You don't need to beat her. You need to know who you are and be able to live with that." His voice dropped, calm but unshakable. That alone puts you ahead of most people. That night, I moved into his attic room. A scratched wooden desk by the window, peeling posters, a dim yellow bulb that buzzed softly. Nothing was new. And yet, the room didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt like it had been waiting for me. I turned on the light, opened my laptop, and pulled up the investment plan I'd started last year, but never finished. I sat up straight, placed my hands on the keyboard, and for the first time since the will was read, I felt something inside me shift. Not rage, not revenge, something quieter, something stronger, a beginning. The first thing I learned in Uncle James's house was this: silence can be kind. Not the kind that avoids problems, but the kind that gives you space to breathe without being judged for how long it takes. The attic room became my world. It wasn't big. The ceiling slanted just enough that I had to lean slightly to one side when I stood near the window. The wooden desk bore scratches from years of use, and the yellow bulb above hummed faintly, like it was reminding me it was still working. But for the first time in my life, every inch of the space belonged to me. No comparisons, no quiet expectations, no need to stay small. By day, I worked at a modest market research firm. Nothing glamorous. Data trends, consumer behavior, reports. No one ever read all the way through. But it paid the bills, and more importantly, it didn't demand I pretend to be someone else. By night, I read personal finance books, investment forums, case studies about overlooked land, zoning shifts, slow growth neighborhoods no one talked about yet. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not because it was a secret, but because I was still unlearning the instinct to shrink whenever someone noticed me trying. Uncle James noticed anyway. One evening, he walked into the attic while I was taping a printed map to the wall, red dots scattered across it like a constellation no one else could read. He leaned against the doorframe, holding a cold beer. "Back in my day," he said lightly, "we did the same thing. Except instead of Google Maps, we had fold-up paper ones. Creased to hell." I laughed softly. He didn't ask what the dots meant. He didn't need to. He took a sip of his beer, studied the wall, then said quietly, "Don't buy the spots that are too cheap, Addie. They're cheap for a reason." I turned toward him. Look at where people are starting to move, he continued, not where everyone keeps saying growth will happen. That was it. No lecture, no pressure. Just one sentence that changed how I looked at everything. The first piece of land I bought was near a small industrial park, affordable, within the savings I'd scraped together over 2 years, with a modest credit guarantee from Uncle James. At the time, it felt right, until it didn't. The city delayed the planned highway project. Tenants backed out. The numbers turned red overnight. I sat in Uncle James's backyard staring at my laptop, spreadsheet glowing like an accusation. He came out quietly, lit a cigarette, and sat beside me. "You just finished your first real lesson," he said. I exhaled a dry laugh. "An expensive one." He nodded. "Better to mess up when you're broke. Mistakes hurt less then." He flicked ash into the tray. "If you wait until you've built something real," he added, "one mistake can cost you everything." That failure didn't break me. It calibrated me. I learned to diversify, to hire legal advisors, to set up clean structures, to never pour everything into one dream, no matter how convincing it looked. 3 years passed like that. Slow, quiet, intentional. I wasn't rich, but I had assets. A few clean land plots, 2 small rental homes, a fully occupied prefab housing unit near the city's edge, and I still lived in the attic. Not because I couldn't leave, but because I didn't need to prove anything by going. That's when Ethan came into my life. Not like a whirlwind, not like a rescue, just naturally. He worked in urban logistics, practical, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We met through a mutual friend at a low-key dinner, and when he asked what I did, he didn't interrupt or try to one-up me. He just asked questions. And when I talked, he remembered. That alone felt radical. We took things slow. And maybe because of that, I noticed something early, something familiar. His ex-girlfriend, Brianna, still hovered around his digital life. Not directly, not obviously, just enough. Likes on old photos, comments framed as jokes, stories that appeared exactly when Ethan and I posted something together. I didn't accuse him. He didn't dismiss me. We talked. And for the first time, I realized how deeply the past had trained me to expect replacement, to assume I was temporary. Ethan stayed, steady, uncomplicated. And while I was quietly building my future, news about Lucy drifted in like background noise. She'd started investing in real estate. She'd mortgaged the family house. She'd opened a cafe art studio hybrid everyone online seemed obsessed with. Uncle James heard about it too. He didn't comment. Silence again, the thoughtful kind. One afternoon, a message popped up from Mrs. Linda, one of Mom's old neighbors. "Is Lucy doing okay? I saw someone else driving her car lately. And that motorcycle she loved, it looks like it's for sale." I stared at the message longer than I expected. Then, a week later, I saw it. The house. Urgent sale, owner direct, negotiable. The home I was pushed out of, listed like any other asset. I forwarded the listing to my legal team. 3 days later, an offer was submitted through one of my subsidiary companies. No names, no emotions, no history. We didn't negotiate. We paid quickly. I didn't need a good deal. I needed something else. A month later, the paperwork closed. The house was mine. Lucy still lived there. But she was no longer the owner. She didn't know it yet, but she was paying rent to the sister she once called a burden. I didn't smile when I signed the final document. I didn't celebrate. I just sat back, breathed out slowly, and understood something with quiet clarity. I hadn't done this to hurt her. I'd done it to take back the one thing she never thought I'd have: control. And control, I was about to learn, changes everything. Ownership doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through emails, signatures, and documents. No one reads carefully until it's too late. Lucy went on living in that house exactly the way she always had. Every morning, she walked out the front gate in pressed clothes, her hair styled just enough to look effortless. She carried herself like someone who still believed the ground would rearrange itself to support her steps. She told acquaintances she was temporarily leasing a few assets to keep cash fluid. She smiled when she said it. She always smiled when she was bleeding. I never went near the house. Not because I was afraid of seeing her, but because I didn't need to. The contract spoke for me. The first month, the rent came in late. Not dramatically late, just enough to test the boundaries, like Lucy had always done with rules, pushing them slightly, expecting the system to bend. The second month, it came later. Then the third invoice went unanswered. The property management office sent reminders. Polite, neutral, professional. The messages were marked red. No response. I didn't intervene. I didn't call. I didn't warn. Because 4 years earlier, no one had warned me. By the fourth missed deadline, I issued a short internal directive. Activate breach clause. A pay or quit notice was prepared and hand-delivered, signed upon receipt, clear language, no emotion. You have violated payment terms for 2 consecutive billing cycles. Please remit full outstanding balance within 10 days. Failure to comply will result in termination of lease. I imagined Lucy reading it, her eyes narrowing, her mouth tightening, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. This is a mistake. This is temporary. This can be fixed with the right conversation. Because Lucy had never lived in a world where charm didn't work eventually. But charm doesn't negotiate with contracts. Day 9 passed. No payment. Day 10 arrived. The system issued the next notice automatically. Lease termination initiated. Lucy still didn't respond. No calls, no emails, no desperate explanations. I guess she was stalling, waiting for the real owner to show up, confident she could smooth it over. On day 15, the notice to vacate was issued. 7 days. The paper was taped to the front door, a certified copy mailed, a digital copy sent, with red receipt confirmed. I received the report through our internal system. I opened it, read it, clicked complete. That night, snow fell early. Soft, steady, unapologetic. I finished work late and drove home along an old street without realizing it at first. The one with the familiar curve. The one where my mother's house still stood. I slowed, pulled over across the street, left the engine running, and that's when I saw her, Lucy, dragging boxes down the porch steps, a knit beanie pulled low over her forehead, gloves soaked through, her jacket darkened with melting snow. She bent to lift a suitcase, her breath fogging the air in uneven bursts. No one was helping. No voices inside the house. Just the sound of effort, of weight, of consequences. For a moment, the past overlapped the present so cleanly it made my chest ache. I remembered myself on that same porch. Different year, different morning, same silence. Back then, I had driven away in an old SUV with my entire life stuffed in the back. Tonight, I sat behind the wheel of a warm car, watching my sister do the same. I didn't get out. I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I just sat there, like the last audience member left in a play where the lead actor forgot to lower the curtain. After loading the final bag, Lucy slammed the trunk shut and stood still. She looked back at the house. 3 seconds. In her eyes, something flickered. Regret, disbelief, maybe even understanding. Then she got into the car and drove away. Her taillights bled red across the snow before disappearing around the same curve where I had once vanished. A week later, I moved back in, quietly. Only Uncle James knew. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "If you're coming back this time, don't live like a guest." I nodded. That house had belonged to my mother, then to Lucy. Now it belonged to no one's ego. I lived simply, worked, came home, watered the porch plants on weekends. Silence settled in, but silence never lasts. One afternoon, Ms. Martha, the elderly neighbor, stopped by with a bag of oranges. "I saw Lucy the other day," she said gently. "She asked who bought the house. I mentioned you'd moved back in." She paused. "You should have seen her face." I smiled politely, but inside I knew what was coming. 3 days later, Lucy rang the doorbell. Once, twice, impatient. When I opened the door, she stood there in a white dress shirt and gray tie, shoes still damp from the rain. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not surprised," she said. "The neighbors filled me in." She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. We sat across from each other in the living room, 2 cups of coffee between us. Neither touched. "I've got nothing left, Adeline," she said finally. Her voice softened, just enough to sound sincere. "I know I wasn't perfect, but if you're the last person in this family still willing to listen, I'm asking for one chance." She met my eyes. "One small room, even a corner." I didn't hesitate. "No." Her head snapped up. "You hate me that much?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't owe you anything." Her smile vanished. "I carried this family," she said sharply. "Mom chose me." I felt my fists clench, then relax. "You're right," I replied evenly. "I was pushed out of this house once, but this time I'm the one choosing, and I choose not to repeat your mistakes." Lucy laughed, short and bitter. "You think you've won?" she said. "You're still the quiet little sister, just better at hiding your claws." I said nothing. She stepped closer. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I met her gaze. "Go ahead." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. That night, the video went live. A minute long, carefully edited. Lucy's voice cracked with emotion. "I lost everything," she said. "I just asked my sister for a place to stay." Then my voice, cold, clipped. "No." The caption read, An older sister loses everything. Her younger sister turns her away. The internet exploded, and for a few hours, it almost worked. By morning, my phone felt heavier than usual. Not because it weighed more, but because every notification carried a judgment. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. Distant relatives crawled out of silence to send carefully worded messages that all meant the same thing. How could you? The video Lucy posted was everywhere. 1 minute long. Soft lighting. Sad piano music underneath her trembling voice. She framed it perfectly. An older sister brought low, asking for nothing more than a corner of the home her heartless younger sister had reclaimed. The comments poured in. Blood is blood. Money really changes people. She just needed a place to sleep. I watched the clip once, just once, and I understood exactly what Lucy had done. She hadn't come to ask for shelter. She had come to control the ending. Lucy had always needed to be the hero, or the victim, never the cause. I didn't respond right away. Not publicly, not privately. I went to work like normal. I cooked dinner. I sat in silence. Ethan asked if I was okay. I told him the truth. I will be. That night, I opened the folder I'd created weeks earlier. Security footage. Not because I expected Lucy to come back, but because I had learned something the hard way. People who feel entitled to your space don't stop believing they own it just because the paperwork changes. The camera footage was clean, unedited. From the moment Lucy stepped inside the house to the moment she left, every word, every shift in her tone, every insult she thought no one would hear once she stopped performing. I uploaded it without music, without captions, without commentary, just timestamps and visible audio waves. The truth doesn't need a soundtrack. The video spread faster than hers, because it didn't ask for sympathy. It offered clarity. People watched Lucy's voice harden, watched her smirk slip through the cracks, watched her threaten to turn the family against me. The comments changed, then disappeared. Lucy's original post vanished within 48 hours. Her account disabled comments, then went quiet. Relatives stopped messaging. The loudest ones always do. 2 weeks passed. I heard through a mutual contact that Lucy had sold her last car, that she was staying somewhere temporary, that she was keeping a low profile. I didn't check. I didn't need to. But one night, standing in the driveway, I looked at the old SUV. The only thing Mom had left me. The car that had carried every version of me, from the girl who left with nothing to the woman who came back with everything she built herself. I made a decision. Not out of guilt. Not out of pity. But out of closure. I didn't meet Lucy. I didn't drive the car to her. I arranged a courier. The SUV, the papers, one envelope. Inside it, a single handwritten note, folded once. The day you threw me out, I left with this car. It was my beginning. Now it's yours. That was all. I wasn't waiting for thanks. I wasn't hoping for apology. Some people aren't meant to walk the rest of the road with you. And forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means closing it without anger. That night, I climbed back up to the attic, went through my mother's old boxes. I found a photo. Our family, years ago. Mom, Dad, Lucy, and me. I was standing at the edge of the frame, half smiling, eyes tilted slightly away from the camera. I wiped the dust off the glass, left the crack in the corner untouched, and I hung it in the hallway, not to honor what was lost, but to remind myself of what I survived. Because I didn't win by taking anything from Lucy. I won by finally choosing myself, and that was the ending she never planned for.